So tell us how you got here and how you heard about this place.
I was in Boston in college at the Boston Museum School, and I realized that I needed to leave the United States. I needed to leave, have a new life. So I went to the office where they had the school list of art schools around the world, and I opened it to which could have been Indonesia or Iceland, but it came to Instituto Allende. So I put in my application and I came to the Instituto Allende. I spoke no Spanish. I knew nothing about Mexico. All I knew is I needed a new life.
And what year was this?
1976.
So had you heard about San Miguel at all before then?
No, like I said, I opened the book of an international Rolodex of art schools and I picked which is in the middle of the alphabet, and that was the Instituto Allende.
So tell us about your experience getting to San Miguel.
I arrived in Mexico City and I took the bus and I arrived in San Miguel Allende at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I knew no one and I had no hotel reservation, and I dragged my suitcase down to the San Francisco Hotel, which is no longer there, but it's the one on the corner of the Jardín. I spent the night, and in the morning I woke up and I looked out and I thought, my God, I've landed on another planet. This is not Boston. This is not what I expected. It was this beautiful colonial town. And I realized I had probably made a mistake.
But obviously you stayed.
Well, it was Sunday morning. I had to go to school Monday morning. I'd committed myself. I had applied, I had paid my tuition, so I came. But the day before, I was walking around the Jardín in the nighttime doing the Paseo.
Can you explain to us what that is exactly?
Okay. Years ago, this is 47 years ago, there was a tradition called the Paseo, or the Paseo. Boys would walk around the outside of the Jardín and girls would walk around the inside of the Jardín, and those that were couples were supervised on the interior circle. And when they did this, the boys could see the girls and the girls could see the boys. It only happened on Sunday night. I had no idea what I was looking at. I only realized I needed to find a hotel, I needed to find a school, and I needed to integrate into this culture that I knew nothing about. In the course of standing on the corner, this man kept walking around, and every time I saw him, I kind of flirted and tilted my head, and I thought I was really cute, and he was really cute. But then I realized, no, this is not what I came here for. I came here to go to school, so I need to stay on the picture. So I walked across the Jardín, and I sat down on the wall next to the mariachis where they were playing to think about what I was going to do here while I was in Mexico. And boom! The man who I had been watching sits down next to me and asks me if I would like to go for a Coca-Cola in Spanish. I didn't understand Spanish, but I understood Coca-Cola, so I said yes, because he was very handsome. And the rest is history. I married him a year later.
But you went to school.
I did. I went to school on Monday, but I could care less about school now. I was in love. I was absolutely smitten. I had found the man of my dreams, and I was going to live in Mexico with him.
And so this was actually your first day in San Miguel.
This was my first 24 hours in San Miguel.
And tell us, so your husband was from San Miguel?
He was from the ranch. He was from a ranch outside of town, about 20 kilometers, called La Jolla. And he is the son of a rancher with 14 brothers and sisters. And he spoke no English whatsoever.
And so how long did you stay at the Instituto?
A year.
And tell us about what that was like. What was the environment like at that time?
Oh, it was like, this whole experience for me was like stepping back in time. San Miguel was darkly lit, cobblestone streets, beautiful puffy clouds because it was September and the rainy season was there. And there were only very few Americans around. It was an expat community even then. There were expat people who had migrated here. Many of them were much older than me, but there was also this tribe of young women like myself who were at the Instituto Allende. By the end of that first year, 9 of us had gotten married to Mexicans, and I think I am the only one that is still married to Valentine.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And did you get what you wanted from the Instituto? What kind of art were you doing back then?
I was a ceramics major in Boston, and so I continued being a ceramics major here in the Instituto. My intention was to finish college and go back to Boston. But I decided no, marriage was much better. So I only finished 1 year and I never finished college.
And so when you decided to stay here, I know you wrote a book about this experience called The Ranch. So can you talk a little bit about your first year of marriage, for example, what that was like?
Well, it was hard for me to understand this man that I didn't speak any Spanish to, and he didn't speak English. So at one point he mentioned to me he would like to take me to where he lived, and I thought he was going to take me to a house in San Miguel, but he said that he lived on a ranch, and I thought, I don't even know what that means. So we get on the bus and we go 20 minutes out into the desert, and back then there were no towns. There were no little streets that ran off. There were no signs on the side of the road. There were just landscapes full of cactus. So the bus pulls up, the bus stops, the bus drives away, and the two of us are standing there on the concrete, and there's a tiny little path that goes off into the desert, and he starts walking, and I follow him, and in the middle of this I think, oh my God, he's going to kill me. I've only known this man 3 weeks. What am I doing? You know, another one of those epiphanies of how did I get myself into this? Remember, I'm in Mexico by myself. I don't have any backup. I don't know any people.
And how old were you?
I was 21.
Okay.
So we walk for a while, and he tells me house, you know, casa. I kind of got that. I don't see a village. I don't see anything. And finally, after 20 minutes walking in the desert, we see this village, and out from behind a rock wall comes this very short woman with these long gray braids, and it's his mother. And again, I'm just shocked. I was thinking we were going to the ranch someplace in Texas where they had these stone horses on either side, and they had the horses and the beautiful verandas and, you know, this luscious kind of ranch life. No, no, no. This was ranch life. No water, no electricity, dirt floors. She had a beautiful collection of bougainvilleas that grew everywhere, and begonias. This ranch was very run down. On the other hand, it was beautifully kept. It was pristine. And it was a pleasure to be around these very different people who also didn't speak any English. I just smiled a lot.
And did you live out there for any point in time?
We went out there almost every week or every 2 weeks, and we would see his parents, and we would come back. Sometimes we spent the night. She always cooked beautiful meals, and when we left, she'd always give me a couple eggs or a kilo of beans, and I never wanted to take anything from them, but they were generous, they were kind, and they gave us all their attention, and of course they loved their son. I think they were a little suspicious of a gringa coming along and kind of always arriving with him now.
So little by little, obviously you learned Spanish.
I did.
And did Valentine start to learn some English?
He did. He learned very little. He and I spent most of our time working on my Spanish, and then the year we were married, we went to the United States and spent 3 years there, and he learned his English because he worked in a factory with 18 women.
And where was that, in Boston?
That was in Boston, yes.
Mm-hmm. And how did he handle those winters?
He loved winter. He didn't know when, I have to tell this story, forgive me, but it was one of those winter days, and if you've never lived around snow, you don't know, but when you've lived around snow, you wake up in the morning and you know it has snowed because everything is kind of a deafening, kind of quiet, puffy, cloud-like experience. So I was laying in bed next to him thinking, oh, it must have snowed. I didn't think anything of it. Then he gets up. I thought he went to the bathroom. He comes back to the bedroom, and he's got snow in his hands, and he's standing over the bed, and he says, "It's wet." And I was like, well, of course it's wet. It's snow. But he said the only snow he'd ever seen was in a movie theater. So for him, it was so magical. And for me, it was wonderful because I was experiencing my own country in a different way. Mm-hmm.
But back in San Miguel, that very first year you were here, what was like your daily life like? What did you do? Where did you go?
Well, everything was new to me. When you went to the market, you brought a glass bottle and they filled it with oil. If you bought butter, they wrapped it in a piece of paper. If you brought vegetables, they just put them in a big bag. You carried with you your little metal egg basket. It was commonplace for people to shop in this way, and it was entirely new to me. But it was magic, and it was beautiful and beautifully cared for, and people had time, and there was a lot of meandering and sitting around and talking. There were horses that would walk through the street. There were burros that were carrying wood. There were very few taxis. At night, the street lights were romantic. They were yellow, and they would burn just in little areas, and you'd walk from one area to the next area to the other. When it rained, the streets would fill with water, which fortunately still happens. I wish there was more water. But I don't know, the flowers were beautiful, the people were beautiful. It was like being in a movie set, I think. It still is a lot of ways that way.
And for socializing back then, what were people doing?
Well, you know, we were 21, so we were all drinking and dancing, and the discotheques didn't open until 1 or 2 in the morning, and there were, let's see, there was the fragua, and there was the escondido, and there was the ring. So on a good night, we'd hit all 3 of them, and we spent a lot of time in the cucaracha drinking beers and drinking tequila shots. There weren't very many restaurants. There were, I can't remember the names of them, but there was one in Hotel Carmina.
Bougainvillea.
Bougainvillea, the Toro was a little place you could get tacos. But you didn't need much. I don't know why I didn't need much. I was full of life, and I was in love, of course, so that helps.
So were you amazed at this point of your life that you're still here?
Oh, there's not a day that goes by when I don't pinch myself and say, how did I end up here? I'm very happy. Valentine and I have carved out a beautiful life together. We've got a couple houses that we rent and the house that we live in, and 30 years ago, we've been married for 47 years. 35 years ago, I started getting into religion and Christianity, and 30 years ago, I painted my first icon, and when I did that, again, my whole life had changed. It changed as much having done that one painting as it did getting on that plane to come to Mexico.
Well, tell us a little bit about your art and what you're doing today.
I paint with egg tempera, which is a mixture of egg yolk and million-year-old dirt to make divine image. It's an art form that goes back 1,500 years to the time of the Byzantine Empire in Constantinople. It's in Istanbul, which is what they call it now, Greek and Russian iconography. And basically all of the work is based on the Bible. So you take images from the Bible and you recreate them in a form where they can be sacred art used for devotion or sacrament.
And are you're teaching as well, right?
I teach, I started teaching about 20 years ago, and I have to say, at this point, between teaching and between painting, they're about even. Oh, that's not true. I like writing books too. I like my life. I've enjoyed my life enormously. Valentine and I never had children. We chose not to, which was a scandal in the family. In the Mexican culture, you would think everybody has to have children. And we just decided, no, that wasn't necessary. When I'm talking about Valentine being in the United States and discovering the snow, we had gone to Washington first before we went to Boston. So in Washington, it was the peak of the fall season. We had never seen, I had myself, having been raised in New England, had never seen the colors, the trees that beautifully displayed. It was one of those spectacular falls when all of the trees are in their prime. So we're on the bus quietly. We've been around these trees. We've been around Washington. We're on the bus. We're going over to visit some friends who live in the western part of Virginia. And Valentine's sitting there in the bus looking out the window, and he turns to me and he says, "Are the trees always this color?" And I just, again, it was one of those moments. And I know it might not have anything to do with San Miguel Allende, but it does have to do how two cultures can come together and experience such a variety of change, and yet we melded. We melded in a way that it was romantic, but it was also, I guess, sort of divinely inspired. It happens to lots of people, but I've been grateful that it happened to me. Speaking about my revelations in Mexico, when he took me to the ranch and his mom sent me to the river to get water. I'd never gotten river water out of a bucket. My river water always came out of a spigot. So I go down and I find the hole and I look in the hole and I just think, well, there's the bucket and there's the cup. So I cupped it all into the bucket and then I carried it back to the ranch. And his mom picked up the bucket and threw it into the plants, into her beautiful bougainvilleas, and then handed me the empty buckets again. And I thought, okay, I guess she wants more water. So again, I went down to the river. This is a good long 20-minute walk down to the river and back again. So I do this, and on the third time, I see Valentine, and I said, your mom keeps throwing the water into the plants. Can you tell me why I'm doing this and for how long I'm going to do this? And he said, I will go with you. And we go down to the river. And the first thing Valentine does is he takes everything out of the water and throws it away, just throws it every which way. Then I'm thinking to myself, this makes no sense whatever. How are we ever going to get nice water? And I look in the hole, and the water starts coming in from the sides of the hole, and it fills up the hole with this crystal clear, beautiful water. And Valentine scoops out the water and puts it in the bucket, and then we carry it back to the house. And his mom pours it into this big olla, and she takes a little cup and drinks the water.
Tell us about spending time out in the ranch, in the countryside. Again, coming from Boston, life must have been completely different. So what are some things that you learned out there?
I had never seen horses and cows and pigs and chickens. I was raised in Nyack, New York. In the first place, since the house didn't have any running water, when you went to the bathroom, Valentine just pointed to the corral where the rock wall was, and I looked over at the rock wall and I thought maybe there's a bathroom over there, so I go over there and there's nothing there. So I squat down to pee, and this giant cow comes walking by, and he gets closer and closer, and I'm peeing and I'm thinking I can't get up. And I'm not really afraid of the cow. He's moving slowly, but I trusted Valentine enormously. I thought, he's not going to send me over here with a corral full of cows if anything's going to happen to me. So I pee and everything's fine, but that's how we did that back then.
And for cooking, how did they make their meals?
His mom had a fire burning in what they called the fogon. She burned a fire, kept a fire burning, embers burning, for 65 years. And other people in the ranch had told me that other people from other ranches where their fires went out, I assume this happened long before I was around, but people came to their ranch to get fire. They would come with some kind of metal or piece of wood or a bucket, I don't know what they brought it, but they would get coals out of her fire and nurture them carefully until they could get them back to their ranch, and they would share fire between them. It's shocking. Valentine's brother is the same age as I am, 69, and when he was 14, he'd never seen a match. So he tells the story that he was walking through the campo, and there was a man on a horse, and he had a cigarette, and he lit his finger. That's the way he described it. And I asked him, I said, light his finger? He said, well, there was actually a little stick with one of those little red fire, like a match. And so he just flipped the end of his finger, and it lit. And so the man gave him a couple of matches, and he brought them home to his mother. And his mother never used them. She just left them off to the side. Well, she didn't need a fire, but that's how different it was. I had gone to private schools, and I'd been on an airplane, and I'd driven around in cars, and here were the same age person who had never seen a match before. That's a pretty big collision in your psyche. I think it was for me anyway.
Oh, of course. Now, what were the meals like? Like you go for lunch?
Some of the best food I ever tasted. And of course, it was made with love, like all people feel about their mothers. His mom made all the tortillas. I tried to make tortillas one day in her metate, and when I went like that enough times, I scratched and hurt my fingernail, and there was a little blood in the... And she reached down and she just pushed a little off and wiped it on her skirt or something, and then she touched me gently on the arm and said, it's okay, go over there. But she would make one tortilla at a time while you were eating on these little tiny stools, and she would hand it to you right off from the fire to your hand. And it was always beans and rice and a couple of eggs, but it wasn't, and it was never served on a table where we would eat at a table. It was little stools and one table in the middle. And everybody kind of dipped out of the same plate, or they had their own plate. But most people ate with, a lot of people never ate with a spoon. They only ate with a piece of tortilla.
And so for Valentine, that must have also been a huge shock to learn your ways.
Exactly. Back to talking about being in the United States, my sister said, "Do you have any laundry?" Because we were at her house. And I said yes, and Valentine followed me into the laundry room. I put the washing machine, the clothes in the laundry, and I closed the lid, and the water started, and I walked away. And I turned around because I realized Valentine wasn't behind me, and he had gone up to the washing machine and lifted the lid to look inside. He'd never seen a washing machine. It was like, I can't describe it really. It was magic because everything was new for both of us. And I'm sure he watched me with the same humor that I watched him. It isn't a humor that degrades or undermines. It was a humor of, aren't you brave for sharing this? And aren't you courageous for trying to understand this? That's magic. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I've told you a few stories about my life on the ranch with Valentine, and truly it was a wonderful year. And I took the time to write these stories down in a small book, and you can read them yourself. And it's parallel reading, so it's in Spanish and English for both cultures to enjoy.